Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, there was some bit of delay in starting this webinar. Thanks for your understanding. Welcome to today's webinar titled The Employee Engagement Playbook of the Best Performing HR Leaders. Thanks to each one of you for tuning in today. I'm Pulkit Joshi, Head of Marketing at HR1, and I'm thrilled to be the moderator for this engaging session today. On today's webinar, our panelists will dive deep into understanding the drivers of employee engagement, furthering the cause on employee communication, figuring out how to develop employee recognition programs, and lastly, figuring out what it takes to be a champion of change management. Okay, so that's like a brief overview of what we're going to cover in today's webinar. Now let's hear from each of our panelists who bring in a wealth of experience and insights to today's discussion. I would just call out their names and then I request them to introduce themselves. Right, we'll start with Ruchira Srivastava. She is the ex-group CHRO at Z Media. Ruchira, if we can have a short round of introduction from you, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Ruchira Srivastava and I have 23 years of experience in leading and stabilizing HR practices. I worked with organization like a pharma company, I worked for an IT company, education company, and my last stint was with Z Media as their group CHRO. I'm here to share my experiences and I'm also here to learn from my peer speakers and also from your questions I would learn. So I'm thrilled to have you all, and we are just waiting to start the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruchira. Next, we have Ms. Megha Gupta. She's the head of HR at C2FO. Megha, over to you, please.
Sure. Thank you, Pulkit, and thank you, Ruchira. So I'm really humbled to be part of this panel. So for everyone, my name is Megha. As you can see, I currently head HR for a fintech company. So we are basically a B2B company who only cater to the top Nifty 50 brands like Apple to Walmart to Costco, and these are our actual clients. So we actually cater to large businesses today. I bring in 20 years of HR experience, and prior to this, I've mostly worked in very, very large organizations like Pfizer, like Sapient, like HCL, like Tata's were some of the organizations that I've worked with previously. I think I'm definitely looking forward for this session because while me and Ruchira will share our insights, but I think we can absolutely leverage this and make it more interactive to hear the audience thoughts and recommendation what they bring in from an expertise. So I would highly recommend that while me and Ruchira answer some of the questions, if you feel that in your organization or in your experience you have done similar things, maybe please leverage the chat window and share your insights as well, because then it becomes like a learning session not just from me and Ruchira, but probably a collective learning session for all of us.
Thank you. Thanks, Megha. And thanks, Ruchira, again for the introductions. We also have on the panel Saurabh Kale. He's the head of people and culture at Talent 500. Saurabh would join us in another 15-20 minutes. He has something that came up last minute, but he's going to be with us very shortly. Right. So now that you have met our esteemed panelists, let's get started, folks. Just two checkpoints, right, from a hygiene standpoint. We will take the questions at the end for the panelists. While that doesn't stop you from putting down your questions in the chat box, you're absolutely okay to do that, but we'll take them at the very end. Second is that we're going to have some poll questions in the middle of it. Of course, it is to make sure that we keep the conversation both ways and of course engage you as well, right? So let's get started with our first pillar, which is around what it takes to drive employee engagement, right? So Ruchira, I'm going to start off with you. What role does leadership play in fostering a culture of engagement? Would love to know your thoughts, please.
Thanks, Pulkit, for this question. I feel that most of the people think that HR should drive the employee engagement, which is not true. It has to be driven by the leadership team too. So, if the leadership plays a very crucial role in fostering the culture of engagement at workplace, setting the tone right. Like a leader is expected to establish the cultural values of the organization through their actions, through their communication, and through their decision making. Leaders can promote open communication, which can help people feel valued, feel connected, and feel heard. Leaders can also help in building transparency, trust in the organization. Because when the communication and when the situation, when people are feel that there's a consistent and fairness which is there in the organization, there's a sense of security for people. I also feel if leaders promote reward and recognition, they can actually foster the employee engagement, and it can increase they can increase the employee engagement levels. So providing autonomy to people, opportunities of growth, then giving the clarity of goals they are expected to do. They can also utilize the strength and talent of employees. That will actually help. The other point is that they can model engagement. So as we say that practice before you preach. If a leader is highly engaged, the team will be highly engaged, and so will be the organization. So leaders have to be role model in driving levels of engagement. Uh, Leaders can also support in the well-being of people. So when I say well-being, it is the physical needs, the psychological needs of employees. People should feel that they are cared for in the organization. And leaders can also drive engagement levels by driving inclusivity. So employees feel valued and they feel included when leadership ensures that they are driving, they are bringing all of them together, and everybody is concerned with the organization goals and vision of the organization. So it enhances engagement levels across diverse groups. These are some of the things which I feel that leaders should do to drive engagement. So they have to actually create a culture. To sum it up, they have to actually create a culture where employees feel motivated, valued, connected, and heard.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ruchira. What a detailed way of putting everything together. Thank you for that. Now I'm going to come back to you, Megha, and this is to do with any examples. I'm sure you would have seen plenty of them, but if you could share some examples of initiatives that have successfully increased employee engagement in your experience.
Sure. And thank you, Pulkit, for that question. So, for the audience, right? And because I've worked in large organization and small organization, I think the first step as an HR is to understand and make the leadership understand the real meaning of engagement. Because even today I have realized a lot of time doing some fun activities is engagement for a lot of business expectations, or probably doing an offsite, or probably just doing some team building activities is like engaging people for them, or doing probably lunches and dinners are engagement for leadership. I think for this set of group, because we have mostly HR professionals, I noticed on the chat window, I think the first step for the organization as an HR leader is for us to define what engagement means. And we need to bring the leadership on speed that engagement caters to not just, what we traditionally have been seeing around, the fun activities, but actually defining engagement starts from, even when you engage with, say, a candidate to say, hey, there is an open position with the organization, it starts at that level. How are you creating an experience with an individual when you do the first touch point as an organization? And from there, it is also about how are you onboarding, how are you giving an experience about interview, what kinds of cultural aspects, like simple things. Do you in the interview process give a clarity, hey, we'll have 4 rounds of interview, each round will cater to one functional, one XYZ, one technical interview, and probably a behavioral, which is core values. Now imagine the kind of experience that you give to an individual as a touch point. And then obviously as the person onboards, it's not just about doing certain activities, but thinking about every single thing, whether it's growth of the individual, how do you engaging from the growth of the individual is about engaging the associate. How does a manager or a leader having a conversation or a two-way dialogue is engaging the associate? uh, or talking about How does the associate feels when they spend 3 years in the organization? Do they feel valued, respected, recognized? That's actually how the engagement looks like. So the first step is articulating where are we on the journey as an HR person is the first step when we define any engagement parameter I would call out. Now, Pulkit, to your specific question around any example that I would give. So I'll give you
Yeah.
an example of my previous to previous organization. Uh, and we were very evolved as an organization when we talked about engagement models there. And I'll talk this specific example in couple of HRBP, feedback because the organization size was large. What was happening, because of that people were joining in the organization. Yeah, people had an overview what we do as an organization, but within the organization, because the business groups were so diverse, people didn't knew what are the other kind of work and the opportunities that happens in the organization. Yes, IGP was only one part of it, but what really happens, what kind of a skill set you need, what kind of a business problem that the people are solving. So a simple solution to that problem, uh, as an HRBP team, we worked with the business and we created like something today. If you think about going to a Tech HR conference or going to a NASCON conference, imagine if you just mirror that and do a conference for all associates within the organization. We call it as a career, conference. And we did a 5 day where we have booths of business talking about what do we do, what do we represent, because it gives an idea to people. Hey, we also do XY type of work. This is the challenge that this business unit solve, and as an outcome we defined as saying the number of IJP position then that we backfill improves. That's engaging people, right? Because then you're simply in a simple way you're giving people download on what are the other kind of work happens in the organization. And we then did a couple of aspects around speed mentoring, bringing leaders together and do speed mentoring. We bring in aspects of external coaches, and say, do you want to experience coaching? And we open it up as a form to say, why don't you have one-on-one coaching as part of those 5 days? We also spoke about let's have external speakers, couple of business speakers talk about what's happening in the industry. We also have couple of global leaders coming together in that conference. In fact, a lot of US people flew down to India to even talking about culture. How is culture built or probably bust in an organization? We also spoke about DNI. Now, imagine it's a lot to cover even for a large organization, but even the glimpses of it, imagine we touched the track around business. What does our business do? We struck track upon talent acquisition. We touch track on, culture, learning, because the fundamental of learning should not be, really push, but rather pull. Because here people are coming forward and saying, hey, I want to do this. And then obviously follow up after 5 days to say, hey, this is what saw traction. So how do we build some of these curriculum going forward from an engagement standpoint? So, and it worked beautifully well. I still remember on day one of that entire piece, because on, we had opening ceremony by our CEO, because CEO got so excited about it. He flew down from US just to be there and, have an opening session. I still remember that day, that floor used to almost have 1,000 people, because the entire office was on that floor that day. It felt like the floor is going to break. It was that kind of population that attracted from an engagement standpoint. So I would say that was a very good classic example of how do you rethink about engagement, uh, and think about every single life cycle touch point of what associate goes through.
Awesome. What a great example. And I'm hoping that people will take a cue from that and emulate some of those similar examples, right? Let's keep going. And this is now for the audience, right? So we are going to flash a poll now, right? You would see a question coming up on Mentimeter. Would request all to chime in with your opinions and your answers. We would love to see how this turns out to be. And this will also help us, all our panelists, maybe double down on specific areas where you need more guidance. Yeah, you need to go to menti.com, and it will ask you for a passcode, so you can just plug in 849111739, if I read that correct. Okay, I don't see much of a response here. So allow me a minute. I'll put the passcode here, right, in the chat box. It's 849 11739. Please use this passcode, and the link is menti.com. Okay. See some responses there. Okay, here you go. Passcode is 84911. So we have 120 plus 118 people on the session right now. We've gotten. Okay, so looks like tide is going in the favor of leadership involvement. That seems to be everyone's favorite when it comes to figuring out the critical most areas. And then second is communication strategies. Okay, so we have a clear winner here for the panelist, Megha and Ruchira. Leadership involvement and communication strategies. While you can focus on all the areas, but maybe you can throw a little more light on these two areas. This was just to do a quick hygiene check on what the audience is wanting to hear. Okay, so let's keep going. A good insight there. Let's keep going. I'm now going to cover what it takes to develop effective communication programs with employees, right? So Ruchira, back to you. What channels and platforms are most effective for communicating with employees?
Thanks, Pulkit. I think audience also wants to listen on this, so
Yeah.
we will surely share our experience and insight. So there's no one way of communication. We have to actually use mix of communication strategies. It all depends on what is the kind of organization culture we have, what is the kind of workforce we have, and what are the specific communication needs. I feel there are I'll just talk about a few of them which is coming to my mind. Email is is best suited for formal communication. It is any sort of announcements and any sort of detailed information can be shared with the employees through emails. We can also use intranet. These days we extensively use intranets for centralized information sharing, anything to do with company news or maybe policy updates we can share on intranet. uh, we are also using for instant messaging services. We can use WhatsApp while it is an unofficial way of communicating things. But when we see that most of our people are on WhatsApp, we can actually use that as well for informal communication. We can use Slack and Microsoft Teams also. Then for remote meetings or any sort of online meetings, we can use video conferencing for communicating to employees. We can use monthly town halls, all hands, wherein we can share any sort of major announcements which are to be made, any sort of strategic updates. We can use employee surveys and feedbacks because that actually helps us in knowing employee sentiments. uh, these days I'm also seeing that people are using digital signages for any sort of visual announcements to be made. People are using mobile apps for people who are generally on the for on the go employees. We in my past organization we used to have this mobile app which we got through a HRMS system, and we were able to share information and messages through the mobile apps. We can use internal newsletters which talks about employee spotlights, regular updates. Face-to-face meetings are best when we have some sort of sensitive discussions, performance reviews. They are the best for these things. We can place some feedback and suggestion box too. It can be a physical one or a digital one. Uh, to conclude, I would say that there is no one way of communicating with people. We have to use a mix of all these which I discussed above. Um it all depends on the nature of the message we want to share with people, the kind of audience we have, and also what is the kind of desired outcome we want. So, for example, if it's only people who should know what is happening in the organization, newsletter work best. But if we have to share some information which we want as a quick message to the people, we can use accordingly. So there is no one way of communicating with people, but we can actually use mix of things, and we can choose the appropriate communication platform for talking to our people, sharing information with our people. I hope this covers. You're on mute, Pulkit.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, thanks for that. That was a very exhaustive list. Thanks for sharing. Now I'm going to come back to you, Megha, right? And if we look at an organization, right, it's a summation of multiple segments which are disparate from each other, but very similar to each other, right, as a group within. And I think each of those groups might have a very different way of encoding, decoding what comes to their way from a communication standpoint. So, how must HR leaders, tailor communication strategies to different demographic groups or different functions or departments? Your thoughts on that, please.
So, Pulkit, again, I'll use two examples here, right?
Please.
I still remember, when we all knew that as part of the labor compliance, the maternity is going to move from 3 months to 6 months, right? While we always knew, right? In one of my organization, what we proactively do, and it's a classic example. See, how many times when we have to define a policy, we probably, as an HR, think about we are the subject matter experts and probably design it ourselves, take an alignment with the leadership, and probably roll it out. We absolutely knew that what the maternity laws are going to be in the future, but we said, yeah, we absolutely know what it's going to be. We have the labor view as well, but why don't we, think about who are we making this policy for? This is basically for the people, which is not just maternity policy but the parent policy, if I have to call out, which is obviously the set of parents that who's going to go through that journey. So what we did was we actually crowdsourced and use our obviously our platforms to say, why don't you say how should our parental policy look like? And we opened it up to all the people to participate and have their viewpoints. Obviously there were all type of views. Some would be very practical, some would be absolutely not practical from an organization standpoint. But imagine the kind of involvement people felt from a communication. Now people knew prior to hand that it's going to come up. That's why we're seeking for that interest. Once we had the inputs, we combine it to say what actually the major themes are coming, what's absolutely practical, not practical. And fast forward, because of that, instead of 6 months, we actually rolled out a policy for 6.5 months, because that was the maximum sentiment around it. Similarly for parents, which is the father side of the thing, while the law doesn't mandate so much beyond 5 days, because the most of the sentiments we looked at, it came down to almost giving 21 days of paternity leave. And then it also came about, what do we do with LGBTQ community? How do you define when they go for a parental journey? So looked at every lamb. Now think about the communication strategy. It's not just engaging and involving people to crowdsource idea, but that also acts as a communication of precursor of, hey, what's coming up, why don't you share your ideas? Then going back and saying thank you for your idea, this is what we have heard, at least as a summarization. And then when we roll it out, and obviously as a change management, then having group conversations to say why we came with this solution and why does it make sense. The communication of doing the same thing is very different than how today we try to solve a policy decision. And very very simple example of a policy communication: Now, second example I'll give, Pulkit, in in my one of the organization, we were going through a huge transformation because we acquired somebody, it was large from a scale and size, and which means effectively every day some or the other interventions were happening, including org design, org structures, changes and stuff. We said that, we are so large suddenly, I don't think so HR can manage this communication or marketing can manage, because we can only do one way conversation with the mammoth of things that we have to deal with. And that's why we created a council of people where you will have every level of people. We will interact with them, apart from obviously a formal communication strategy on email that will go out, and town halls that we will end up doing. Let's have that council who we will also talk about what are we doing, why are we doing, and let them go and disseminate this information, to the ground level. And then we used to seek them every monthly as a feedback to say, what did you hear about these interventions? Now, very different communication strategy, but that worked very, very effectively, because you get the real feedback from the ground on how people are taking that intervention that we rolled out. And there were times that we rolled out something with the best of the interest of the people, but the feedback from the ground was something very, very different, as part of that change. And we had to course correct it, and it came out as a shocker. Oh my god, we never even thought about these questions. Where are these questions even coming from? But we realized that's how people take it sometimes. So how do you go back and then recommunicate, change your strategy, re-talk about the entire thing, saying, hey, this is not we actually meant at all. But that really, really helped us to really think, because maybe we write something over an email, but the grapevine that happens is far different than what we kind of intend. So my submission to this group is, don't stick to only formal way of communication, which is emails, town halls, small group conversations, because those are formal. We have to think about informal ways when we communicate things, because then the success of rolling out that intervention or a policy or whatever that you're planning to communicate on, you will know the ground realities of what people are thinking, and then you can course correct much faster.
Awesome. Thanks, Megha. Thanks for sharing that detailed response. And I love the intricacies that you also covered as part of what we can do differently. Thank you for that. I see our third panelist, Saurabh Kale, has also joined us. Saurabh, warm welcome to the webinar.
Hi, thank you.
Awesome. If you would want to introduce yourself, perhaps we can take a minute or so, and then we'll continue with the discussion. Please, over to you.
Sure, thanks a ton. My name is Saurabh. I lead the human resources for Talent 500. We are a young startup of 3 years old, 250 odd people now, trying to kind of make leaps and bounds in different countries outside of India as well. Um, Primarily, I have close to around 18 years of experience. Started my career from uh, every department of HR and kind of, rose up the ranks, but spent a lot many years in the learning organizational development space and human HR business partnering. So something that I hold very dear to me, and that's in short about me. But I'll probably allow the audience to discover more about me through the social platforms and otherwise, you know, and I hope to bring value to this conversation as we continue forward.
Thanks, Saurabh, and welcome again. We'll do one more poll question here. So the link is there in the chat box for the audience, and so is the passcode. Okay, it's coming up. What is the biggest communication challenge in your organization? Should start to see some action. I'd encourage all folks in the audience to go to menti.com and type in the passcode. There'll be from there on. It's very easy. Okay, someone says the slide has not changed. Okay, I think there is some tech issue. We'll cover this question again. but some folks are saying it's the same slide. It's not working. Okay, we'll come to that. We'll try and see how we can cover that question again. Uh, so let's keep going. We're going to cover the third pillar of this webinar, which is going to be around empowering employees through recognition and rewards. Ruchira, question for you. Can you share examples of how recognition programs have positively impacted employee engagement?
Thanks, Pulkit. And It's a very good question. It's a very interesting question. What I always say is that whatever gets recognized gets repeated. So if you have to, improve the engagement levels of people, of your employees, then we must have some sort of R&R programs in the organization. So how it impacts is it has a very profound impact on the lives of people. It helps in creating a culture of appreciation and motivation. It can actually increase, productivity for them. So I will take an example of one of the programs which Google runs, which is called peer-to-peer program, wherein employees can publicly acknowledge each other for their contributions. So it actually increases the level of motivation of people, and they feel valued. It helps in controlling the attrition. In my past organization, we introduced a quarterly sales incentive program for our sales employees, and we could see the attrition rates coming down for especially for sales during that time. It actually helps in enhancing the team collaboration. So in Z, we had this instant recognition system wherein we used to give Weldon cards. So it can be given to anybody in the organization. It can be to the colleague. It can be to the different department. It was kind of 360-degree run instant recognition program. It helped us in enhancing the team collaboration. It also, improves the employee well-being. Any R&R program will actually help in improving the well-being because people feel more connected with the company's mission and vision. Uh, it also helps in stronger organization, in building a stronger organization culture. Uh, it increases the engagement and job satisfaction for people. In LinkedIn, we have a program called Bravo, and this program is also, is also doing an instant. It's an instant recognition program through a digital platform, and it helps in increasing the level of satisfaction, job satisfaction, and engagement levels. It's increasing. It is indirectly and directly responsible for increasing the engagement levels of people. So, as far as R&R programs are concerned, they are actually helping the organization and as a whole, and even the individuals for increasing the level of engagement and bringing a job satisfaction to employees. So, it is quite helpful, and I have personally witnessed that happening in all the organizations I work for.
Okay. Thanks, Ruchira. Now, let's tackle this important aspect of the overarching, theme of uh, how the employee gets engaged, and then a lot of needs to be done at HR's end to actually manage that change, right? So, while these strategies and the tactics are important, execution is equally important, right? So, my next question again is for you, Ruchira. So, amidst these many changes that might happen, right, how do you help employees navigate through these periods of uncertainty, ambiguity?
So, Pulkit, that's also a very relevant question. I think, you're picking up the best questions for this group to answer. While we all understand that, navigating periods of change and uncertainty is quite challenging for everybody in the organization, for HR, for the employees, we can have some strategies, which I actually had in my previous organizations, where if you have to make some changes, or for example, if we want to try to automate a process, how do we manage the emotions of people? So the best thing to do is having a clear and transparent communication with people. That's very important, because if you are trying to do in silos, people will get stressed out, and they'll not be able to focus on their current work. So explaining them the reasons, and making them part of the decision making process can actually help them. It will actually reduce the uncertainty, and it will build trust for people. We can also provide emotional support to people, because we have these employee assistance programs, we have these counseling services, we have mental health insurances, so that can also be given to employees. We have to train our managers, because managers are the people who are day to day working with employees. So we have to empower our managers to lead that change. We have to equip them with various tools and training mechanisms. We have to train them to listen, to empathize, and even guide the employees through this transition. So all that can be done through the managers. uh, um, and I also mentioned about that, if we involve them in the decision making process, they will be in it, and they will understand that this change will bring maybe a good growth in the organization, which we are all related to. We can also offer training and development to people, to employees, because that will help them taking up a new role in the future. They will actually, they will have this confidence that they'll be able to succeed in that change environment. We can also, that all these things I have done in my organization, past organizations. We can also reward employees who are, resilient, who are adaptable, because that gives them, that gives confidence to others to follow the path. So we can, give such things. And we can actually provide them clear career paths. They should not have any ambiguity. It all boils down to having a proper communication with our employees. We can have a feedback mechanism where we can have some anonymous channels for people to share their feedback. That's something which can be done. So all of them can actually help maintain a positive vision for the future. So we have to just have a good communication with them, train them, equip them with proper knowledge. It will. We have to show them what is in for them. Then I'm sure the transition, the change which we are looking at, can we can be successful in bringing that change. And all these strategies can help reduce the stress and uncertainty in the minds of people, and they will all be in it for a common goal. That's my, I would say that I have followed it, and I have seen the results, and I have seen people coming with you and supporting you with that change.
Thanks, Ruchira. Thanks for that detailed answer. I know you have a hard stop in
Yeah.
another minute or so, so I'd like to thank you on behalf of everybody at HR One, and of course our audience, for joining us today and sharing your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pulkit. Thank you all the speakers, and thank you all my lovely audiences. It was pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll keep going. Megha, on the same topic, right? I would love to know if you could share some examples of how organizations have successfully managed change while maintaining high levels of employee engagement.
Sure, Pulkit. So, see, whenever there is a change, I always talk about two things. Uh, I don't know how many of are aware about the change model, which talks about the S curve. See, every individual goes through that. There's some people on the change journey, they'll probably for the longest time be on the denial zone. Uh, because that's how change is, and it's a proven model to say that's how human reacts to any kind of change that happens to any of us. And from denial they move into anger, from anger they move into acceptance, and from acceptance you become a role model or pioneer into that change. And that's the ideal stage where you would want an associate to be, where they're not just changing themselves but they're also helping an organization to change much faster and adopt into that change. Now, a good change strategy is when you're able to define it at leadership level, who is where in that journey. Similarly at people manager, where are they on the journey in this code zone, and similarly at an associate level where they are at zone, which effectively means not as an HR we talk about it, but including to people managers to see it's a big change in the organization. Where do you think your people, maximum of your people sits at? If the manager doesn't know, maybe go in a town hall and have a mentee like what Pulkit is doing to say, where do you think you are in that change journey today? Ask the associates themselves, because that will help you as an HR or a leadership team to define, to say what are the course corrections or actions that we must take, or interventions that we must be taking, because that's where probably we have done X things to make the change happen, but maybe most of your population still sits in denial or anger zone. So how do you then move forward from it? And you'll be amazed, maybe your next mentee slide should be, so then what should you do? What do you expect as an associate for us to do? I'm telling you, the kind of responses you will get will be your change strategy. I see it, I am an HR person who likes to simplify things than complicate things. A lot of time we as an HR think we are the subject matter expert, we know it all, yeah, but we're dealing with four generations together now, four generations, right? And I believe in seeking for inputs from the ground level, because sometimes they know what they want, and how many times we go and ask, what do you want, and probably give them in the same package or a different package or a little customized package. But ability to do that is what will help move the change journey, than sitting in a room with full of minute I would say gray heads, and then deciding what does millennial or a Gen Z need. I don't think so that works today. I mean, that's my answer, Pulkit.
Thanks, Megha. Thanks for that. Let's now turn to Saurabh, right? Saurabh, and this has to do with understanding the drivers of employee engagement, right? We started off this discussion with that very pillar. And what I'm going to ask you next is extremely crucial, right? So, how do you measure the impact of employee engagement or organizational performance?
It's a very interesting question because, when you talk about engagement, I personally also feel that a lot of human resources professionals themselves look upon engagement as fun activity, or for that matter, events, initiatives, and that's it, right? But a lot of them, when asked that, how did it change business? What impact did it create on the business part of it? All right, and that's where a lot of people probably falter.
Hmm.
So what if today we kind of, connect all the people initiatives to a little aged or a dated concept called balance scorecard, all right? And while I was studying my MBA, I think that concept was pretty new, but today it's a little outdated, but I still love the nuances of it, right? For example, it still talks about finance, how, cost implication. Did it change anything? Did the attrition reduce? Did the turnover kind of go down, so on and so forth. So, one aspect of it could be a balance scorecard, and under that could be finance. The other could be, there is a customer pillar under balance scorecard, which now customers, clients, you can keep changing the word, but let's say that an happy, engaged workforce is able to service your clients better, is able to retain your customers better. All right. And, you have a zero turnover when it comes to customers per se. And, that could be a great measure of your employee engagement initiatives and finally impacting the clients. The third is internal processes, primarily, which is, let's say that an engaged workforce, or a workforce which is invested in the company's development as well, comes up and says, hey, we are taking 4 steps to kind of, make this happen, but now can we make it happen in 2 steps? All right. So they are continuously kind of engaged, innovating, to improvise their own experiences per se. And finally, it's to do with innovation and so on and so forth. Very similar to internal process refinement is the fact that, people are coming up with new product lines. Can we do this? Can we kind of, based on the previous learnings, experiences? So I personally feel that there are activities that HR kind of, can take care of it. And these activities are initiatives, events, fun games, and so on and so forth. But then there is, if you are able to connect them to and measure it against a balanced scorecard, I think that would be a great measure. And you don't have to kind of, sit across the table and justify to your founders and CEOs that, why do we need X budget to kind of keep the folks happy.
Awesome. Thanks, Saurabh. Thank you for that. Uh, let's keep going. So we are not going to have a poll question. This should work now, and you should be able to see that in the platform itself. Okay. Please let us know if you're able to access the question. Question is, what is the biggest barrier to inclusivity in your organization? You should be able to see that in the platform, right? Okay. I see 18 votes have come in. Okay, so it's a neck to neck between lack of awareness and resistance to change. We've gotten about 40 votes now. Okay, so I think we have two clear winners here. Speaking of biggest barriers to inclusivity in your organization, lack of awareness and resistance to change, right? So, yeah, I think we can close the poll. And this brings me to the next question, and this is for you, Megha. Now that you have some visibility into the challenges the audience is facing, would love to know your thoughts. But how can organizations create an inclusive work environment where all employees feel valued and respected? I know it seems very easy to answer this, right? It's a very generic sort of a question, but I feel somewhere it has a very profound background to it, and it's not easy to crack this one.
I
Oh,
can only answer, Pulkit,
yeah,
that
please.
if we would have cracked, if people have read the World Economic Forum
Yeah,
study on the gender gap, and gender is only one aspect of inclusion, diversity aspect. Pre-COVID, it was 99 years. It would have taken us to reach at the parity level of what we require at gender. Uh, just because of one pandemic, now from 99 years, we moved to 135 years. It will take us 135 years to reach to a parity level of what we should be able to provide women into the workforce. So, and when we say that we know it all, probably we don't. And even if we do, it's very very challenging to reach that because of multiple aspects. I think the
right.
first step starts from mindset in my mind, because if we don't have the right mindset, I don't think so we ever can be inclusive uh, as an organization or as a peer or as a leader that we want to do. So how are you ensuring as a HR head or HR VP that every single conversation we are proactively talking about it? I'll give you example. In talent acquisition, how many times we push to say have masking of the resume so that we can be absolutely sure of our own biases that we bring in into the process of the system. Second, we are on this Teams meeting. Now, I can't see who are my listeners today, creates biases. Now, I only interact with the people who type in or ask a question. It's a kind of a bias to be inclusive to everyone who's either reserved or who's not sure if that's the right question to ask, but has a question in the mind. Now, imagine a leader who has 200 people spread across multiple geographies or spread across locations of India, and you have a remote setup or you are into a virtual meeting. How do you ensure that you bring in inclusive thoughts of everybody, maybe the silent most person, who's not sure if this is the right answer, or who's not sure of his or her communication, or who's probably by MBTI profiling an introvert? So are you aware as a leader that how do you get thoughts and ideas of everybody on the table? How do you reach out specifically to the people who's probably the quietest in the room or probably into a virtual setup? Now, these are very, very small examples of how do you bring inclusivity, but I would say it starts from baby steps.
Great. Thanks, Megha. And I totally agree with you on that. Uh, Now I'm going to turn back to you, Saurabh, and this has to do with implementing effective communication strategies. Can you share some examples of communication strategies that have improved employee engagement in your experience?
So there are many, but I think I kind of give principally what has worked for us. All right.
Please.
So I think the best way to kind of start off is it's a threefold approach. Tell them what you're about to tell them, and tell them what you just told them. Now, the way to do it is it could be through emails, We are a Slack organization, so any messaging tools, it could be your floor activities, it could be through your people connects, all right? But the more you're going to kind of, use a combination of visuals as well as, the kinesthetic ways, which is people connects and so on and so forth, I think it's going to be the stickiness of your, communication increases. People have a high recall value of people initiatives or anything that you're currently doing or are going to be doing or have done it in the past. So once again, just for the simplicity, tell them what you wish to tell them and tell them what you just told them. All right. And use a combination of written, and all the other things, and it should work for you. So there's no great strategy that I prescribe to. I like to keep things simple, and this is my simple formula, which has worked for me for years, that keep going back to people with these different ways.
Awesome. Love that, Saurabh. Thanks for sharing. Next question for you. What role does peer-to-peer recognition play in fostering a culture of engagement? And this has to
I
do
think
with,
I'll,
yeah, so sorry,
yeah,
because, I'm going back, right? So this has to do with empowering employees through R&R, recognition and rewards.
correct.
The content.
No, I think Ruchira did cover to a very large extent some of the things that even I would second. But my biggest observation when a peer recognition kind of happens beautifully within the organization is it reinforces the desired behaviors. So I'm a new person and I do a certain thing and I get acknowledged or recognized for that behavior, that hey, you went out of the way and you did it, and it kind of correlates to one of our, say values, earn trust or something, all right? It automatically makes me want to do it even more, all right? So peer-to-peer recognition, I would say, encourages a behavior of or encourages desired behaviors within the organization. It also, I think, cliched, but encourages a lot more collaborative and fostering environment within the cross teams, or let's say within the same teams also. All right. And I personally believe that a culture of appreciation needs to be part of every organization's culture. So it kind of creates a culture of impromptu recognition. You don't have to wait for a formal award or a recognition program to kind of come in. Ruchira did speak about the well done cards. We use simple, effective post-its, leave it on people's desk. We are also a hybrid organization, so we have these pre-filled Canva created cards. You just have to type in the name of the person and what did they do and so on. We have kudos as a channel internally where people kind of, we have Friday 3 to 4 or 3 to 5 sometimes, uh, time slot blocked to say appreciate your colleagues and so on. All right. So people use a combination of all of these things put together. All right. And I think I've seen a great reinforcing, like I said, behavior and a lot more camaraderie kind of happen between different teams and team members because of this impromptu peer-to-peer recognition.
Great. Thanks, Saurabh, for sharing that answer. Now we have another poll coming up.
Sorry, Putket, I have to drop as
Yes,
committed for
sorry.
4:30.
Yeah, I for a moment thought Megha you had left, but thanks again. I know you have a hard stop at 4:30. Thank you so much for coming over and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, audience. It was lovely to interact with you.
Thank you. Okay, so our next question is up on the screen. How do you currently measure employee engagement in your organization? This would be an interesting segue for you, Saurabh, because the next question that I'm going to ask is pretty much on these lines.
So is there a winner of, based
Yeah,
versus the
yeah,
audience thing?
yeah. I think another 10 seconds and we'll be clear on who's leading. Okay, so we have gotten close to 50 plus votes, 55. And it's employee surveys, which seems to be the clear winner, followed by which has 24 votes, and then we have feedback from managers with 10, retention rates 9, productivity metrics 7, and 7 people have said that they don't currently measure engagement. So employee surveys
Yeah.
is I think what people have been mostly doing. But my next question
And
for you is,
before even you ask me question
please,
as well, maybe I could just kind of talk
please.
about it. In fact, my observation is also the same that there is no clear-cut winner. I think all the ways, all of the different ways in which we can measure the thing. But yeah, if you have a specific question, Pulkit, I'll be more than happy
Yeah.
to answer.
So the question was mostly to do with what metrics should organizations track to measure employee engagement. Um,
Yeah.
um, right. So I think we have already employee surveys. I don't think is a metric, right? It's a way to sort
It's
of,
it's a method, yeah. It's a
yeah. So,
method to
so
measure that as well. But if I were to kind of top it up beyond what we saw it as from a survey point of view, through those surveys we can probably measure ENPS. E stands for employee, NPS is Net Promoter Score. So if you want to kind of run a question, how many of our current employees or are you likely to recommend this company to your friends and families? And we get a lot many people answering yes. Then a good promoter score is a good indicator as well, along with the surveys. That the company is doing good on engagement. The other way, I also believe that people work like how we use this cliched Peter Drucker's statement that when people leave, they leave managers, kind of thing. So another survey, or a very interesting one that I came across was manager NPS. How many are you, to like? How many of you are likely to kind of recommend your manager to your team? That like question, and it did kind of create an interesting conversation around it as well. That managers are the talent magnets. They are the ones, the reasons why people want to work for the company. So from a talent magnet metric point of view, you can also kind of look at that another one as well. It's an interesting one. I haven't seen it used very often, but definitely that's the one. Attrition is also another one. How many people are leaving the organization as well. So, which ties into very closely to what we have been talking so far. So, a couple of tried and tested metric like satisfaction scores, ENPS, attrition, manager effectiveness, or in case you're tracking, you have something called as Idea Factory that runs in your organization, which is how many ideas were submitted and how many ideas got executed. All right, those like places. I think that's a great measure for how engaged are people within the organization.
great. Thanks, Saurabh. Hopefully that has helped everyone understand what metrics one needs to track. Let's now take a final thought from you, Saurabh. Any concluding takeaways for the audience? Although I know you joined us late, but overarching, any two or three takeaways from your end?
Sure. So I think, I did miss the initial part where Ruchira and Megha might have kind of, contributed it. But to what extent I heard, I saw, and, what questions I've been kind of tracking the chat channel as well. I think it seems to me like a pretty engaged audience today who have kind of asked the right set of questions. You have been keeping us on our toes as well. But whatever that we do, I always like to ask my team as well, and I would pose the same question to to the audience as well. That why are we doing it? Like, why is engagement so important? Why is employee experience so crucial in today's world, right? And it boils down to the fact that every organization wants to, in a way, become like a preferred employer or great place to work or an amazing workplace that people kind of talk about it for years, right? When I was growing up, I think at a point in time it used to be GE. So everyone who worked at GE would rave about it, would kind of make us give us that FOMO that if you haven't worked at GE, you've missed a lot many things in life, kind of thing. So it till date kind of makes me wonder that what was so different about GE back in the days when other companies also existed, right? And of course, over a period of time, we now understand their people practices and all. Probably a little later, it used to be Google, all right, and so on and so forth. So if every organization is wanting to stand out, if every organization is wanting to kind of, create that niche for themselves in the people practices space, I think, that why is we too need to do something different, right? And different doesn't mean that we have to kind of go out of the way. Do simple things, basic things, but do it right? For example, keeping employees happy, I think, is a basic expectation from human resources teams across the world. And, not just them, I think it is also today an extended responsibility of all people managers out there, right? So invest in engagement, invest in kind of, building that team, a team, as I like to call it, like, or the, the alpha team. All right. And for that, the best metric that I have taken it for myself based on my experience and observations, failures as well, is we call it as great place to work model, which has 5 components, and I don't necessarily remember them, so I've kind of jotted it down. The first part is credibility. All right, it's to do with the leadership and its credibility across the board. If your leaders are not trusted, then the whatever that you do, town halls, all hands, people initiatives, nothing of that sort is kind of going to kind of stand the test of time. The second one is mutual respect, right? So for that matter, whether it is an employer-manager relationship, whether it is an employee-employee relationship, one team against the other relationship, I think if the premise is mutual respect, even if people have differences within the organization, it shouldn't really matter, right? Because they all understand that they are working towards a common goal to make the company successful. Third is sense of pride. All right, everyone, who is in the organization needs to experience that sense of pride that they whatever that they are creating, building, needs to, or rather will have an impact in the future, right? And people go over and above, at a point in time just to make that happen. I worked at a company called Practo, and we were building the India's first health tech, company, to ensure that the appointments, and the doctor's honor and the the patient's honor. All right, and we were trying to solve for this problem, and somehow, a lot of people that we hired during that time, they joined only with this mission that we are changing the health tech space in India, right? And I think that is also a key indicator that how people look upon their work. So when the work volume increases, when things become tough, they don't kind of fret over small little things, because they understand that whatever that they're doing is meant for the bigger things. So there needs to be a sense of pride. All right. Camaraderie. I think a general camaraderie. Can I trust you as my colleague? Can I trust you as my friend? Can I kind of do I look upon you that you will watch out for me when I'm falling? All right. So general sense of camaraderie is my fourth pillar or metric for creating engagement. And finally, because I'm slightly more of an HR professional and a business leader, I want to ensure that people practices or policies are fair. So the fairness part of it plays a very important role in this. That it's not unfair to either side, whether it as an employer or as an employee. That I hate it when certain policies require three approvals. Like a bureaucracy, you go take your file from one table to another table to make that happen. And I think that employee experience reduces the fairness part of it, and you start getting a feeling that does the organization not trust me, right? So imagine policies are simplified, imagine the people practices are simplified, and all of that kind of gives a sense of fairness to that individual. All right, I think that's in short I would recommend. Finally, I'm just going to kind of repeat all of that. So there are 5 pillars. Lead, I mean, like credibility of the leadership, mutual respect amongst each other, sense of pride, for the work that you do, camaraderie with colleagues that you work with, and fairness in people practices and policies. So that's the key takeaway, I would say. If anyone has to kind of walk away from this workshop, and if that could be a wrap up statement, I would leave you guys with that.
Awesome. Amazing. Thanks, Saurabh. I think we can take a couple of questions. I think you did respond to one of the questions, which was uh, how do we correlate the employee engagement to balanced scorecard method? So I'm assuming that whosoever asked that question would be able to take the inputs from in the comments box. A couple of interesting questions here, Saurabh. If we have time to take them on, shall we
Yes, we
go?
do have time, so we can kind of go
Okay.
ahead. Yeah.
The first question is, we have a blend of blue collar and white collar employees. What efforts can we take to make blue collar employees feel more comfortable in interacting with all? and participating in engagement activities both online and offline. Very interesting.
So I'm not too sure if the blue collar employees will be, and because I'm just going with the basic thing about blue collar employees. Most of the blue collar employees could be on assembly line. I'm guessing that way. So if that is the case, getting them to kind of participate in an online thing for sure is not going to kind of work out. But imagine that you get the white collared employees on the ground and blue collared employees on the ground, and probably as simple as play a cricket match or a football match amongst each other probably breaks the ice. That that gives them that confidence to kind of voice their concerns, or tomorrow probably bring innovative ideas to the folks sitting in offices. I think you've done a fab job with the simple activity of breaking the ice by with sports. The other way, you can now increase the complexity. You can probably have teams which are mix and match of both sides, and then that's how the camaraderie again can be built in together as well. So I won't say it's just about learning. I would say it's also about learning from each other as well.
Okay. Thanks, Saurabh. Next question. What trends do you see shaping the future of employee engagement? And then second part is how should companies prepare for these changes?
Well, companies preparing for the changes, I'll go in the reverse order. All right. Companies preparing for the change, I think it's an ongoing process. What worked prior to pandemic is not going to work anymore. So I think, pandemic has been the biggest teacher that engagement and engagements definitions and activities are also likely to change in the future, right? But what trends do I see at this point in time? I see a lot of hybrid remote kind of a trend coming in, when it comes to engagement. For all you know, at a point in time, or whatever that we planned as an engagement, whether it's a people initiative or a sports activity or like sports initiative, or sometimes even health related initiatives like walkathons or marathons and so on and so forth, were aimed at a particular audience, keeping in mind that these are people who come to office, probably would have backaches, and so on and so forth. So now your target group back in the day was quite homogeneous in its own way. Today we're talking of heterogeneous. All right, people who kind of have pets at home, people who probably prefer to work from home. If not home, they prefer to go and work in third wave coffee, or probably some co-working spaces. And there are going to be some people who prefer to come to work and kind of do it. Now, if you're planning an engagement activity that is lowest common denominator, encompassing all these sets of people, then it needs to be a little more inclusive. It cannot be targeting only a specific group of people. So personally, I feel that there is, again, it's a generic answer, I understand, but your engagement trend going forward is going to be more inclusive, more probably bringing people together and not helping them work in silos. All right, they build the camaraderie and then they kind of go back probably in their respective worlds as well.
Thanks, Saurabh. I think people are loving your responses. We seem to be getting quite a few questions last 30 seconds or so. But would love to understand how many questions are we in a position to take on.
So I do have a hard stop at 5 o'clock. If audience is excited and would want to continue, I'm willing to kind of go ahead for another 10 minutes or so.
Okay. So let's give it a shot. We still have 117 people, right? So next question for you is, and it's can be a very tricky one. How can we make rewards and recognition process transparent?
All right. So when we typically look at rewards and recognition, I'm when you say talk about transparency, I'm guessing that there's like an annual rewards function,
Yeah.
and then there are nominations that are invited, and then probably there's some selection process, and then the rewards are announced in the annual say founding day get together or whatever it is. Now I understand that is probably the where this question is coming from. But how about flip it, and let's say that you kind of say anyone within the organization can recognize anyone. All right, and that automatically kind of there is no selection process. People can probably feel good about something, come down to your channel, whether it is giving an e-card, whether it is a Slack, whether it is a people Teams whatsoever, and are appreciating the other people. The more the appreciation the person gets, probably in a company, at a company level stage gets rewarded. So automatically the transparency kind of, is right there in a public forum available to all of you. You know why the certain individual is going to get it. But yes, I mean, if companies are still following age-old process where nominations are invited and then there is a black screen, and then suddenly, you probably kind of make the announcements, I'm going to urge those companies and the HRs also to change the way you're looking at it. I've also seen something that has worked is testimonials, where and that too video testimonials, because then the person is on the camera and kind of talks about why this person deserves definitely a recognition at a company level. I think try video testimonials. I've tried it in the past, and it has. I mean, like people were kind of moved to tears, on listening to certain people kind of going way above and beyond certain expectations as well. So try certain variations to kind of ensure that there is enough and more transparency as opposed to the black screen method.
Great. I think we can take one last question because it can be very taxing for you, Saurabh. I know, and this one is very interesting. Dealing and working with four generations together is difficult in itself. When it comes to engagement, their idea of it as well is different from each other. How do we align them together and ensure employee engagement throughout the organization? I think that's a very pertinent and a
That's
very
a
well.
very, very good question and a very interesting approach
Yeah.
as well. Especially, I deal with three generations. Adding one more generation in itself can kind of increase the
Yeah.
complexity of the whole problem. So I totally get where this question is kind of coming from. But here's how I would approach it, and I'm going to guess that it's a pyramid structure even in your organization. So the fourth or the oldest or the whatever the youngest generation is going to be sitting on the top, all right, probably, and then the generation. So if you look at the volume of folks who are going to be new in the organization with more ideas, fresh ideas, or their way to look at recognition is going to be very different, is going to be sitting at the bottom, right, at the base of the pyramid. So if that's the approach we are going to take, then the first and the second layers on the top, can most likely play the role of fairness. They can probably play the role of a mentor. And again, I'm talking of engagement, not necessarily the recognition, but let's say that they have a lot of experience on their side and they decide to pay it forward. All right. So from that point of view, the first and the second layer can kind of play that role. The reverse mentoring can also happen as to to prepare the older generations to kind of cope up with the work pressures, the changing times, and so on and so forth. So personally, if I look at it, what is that I would love to cash from the four generations put together? I would love to cash the experience, right? Now, how do I cash it? Do I create mentoring programs within the organization, which is both reverse mentoring as well as regular mentoring? Definitely, that can be one approach towards engagement. Recognition at this point in time, yes, the leadership level is going to be a little more strict. They're likely to have strict bias, which is they're going to hold themselves a lot more higher, and the future generations a lot more higher as well, right, in terms of expectations. So I think that basically can be kind of worked upon per se as well with the new generation's ideas. So I think there's a lot of cross pollination that I see can happen amongst all these four generations at work. And we have experimented a lot more with mentoring personally, and we have benefited a lot because I think the calmness, stillness, the experience that the older generation brings to the table, and on having seen at least minimum of 2 decades or 3 decades of work, is something that I've seen the Gen Zs kind of truly appreciate because they don't listen to their parents at home, but they have somebody out here who understands them professionally, right? So I think it's a good consolidation and a culmination that has worked for us. But I would also love to hear if there are other challenges and something that has worked for others.
Very well thought out answer. Thanks, Saurabh. I think we have more questions, but maybe uh, for the next time. But as we wrap up, a big thank you to everyone who joined us on today's webinar, and special gratitude to our insightful panelists, Saurabh, Ruchira, and Indranil. But Saurabh, to you as well, thank you for sharing your expertise and sharing your wisdom on this super important topic. Thanks once again, everyone. See you all again very soon with another webinar that is coming up to help you learn from the best in the business. Until then, have a great day ahead and take care. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.